Welcome to the channel The Numis Hunter, and today we are kicking off something truly massive, a 7-part journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies ever pulled from ordinary American pocket change, spanning nearly 4 decades of coin production. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight. We are starting with the 2010 1 cent, a coin so recent, so common in appearance, that most people would never in a million years imagine it could be worth anything beyond its 1 cent face value. And yet, one single specimen of this exact coin sold at auction for an absolutely jaw-dropping $36 million. $36 million for a penny that looks, at first glance, completely identical to the ones sitting in your junk drawer or rattling around in your car's cup holder right now. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something important. This is only the first of 7 incredible coins we are covering today, and I promise you, each one gets progressively more shocking than the last, building toward a final reveal so extraordinary it is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive into exactly what makes this 2010 penny one of the most remarkable coins in modern American history. Let's take a moment to understand the world this coin was struck into. 2010 was a genuinely significant year for the Lincoln Cent series, marking the very first year of the Lincoln Shield reverse design, replacing the Lincoln Memorial reverse that had been in continuous use since 1959. This transition represented one of the most significant design changes in the entire history of the penny, and with any major design overhaul comes an inevitable period of adjustment at the mint as engravers, die makers, and production staff work through the inherent challenges of implementing an entirely new reverse design across massive production runs. This kind of transitional period, as numismatic historians have documented time and again throughout the history of American coinage, tends to create exactly the kind of conditions where unusual minting anomalies are more likely to occur and, on rare occasions, slip through quality control completely unnoticed, precisely because staff attention and standard procedures are being stretched to accommodate the demands of an entirely new design. The primary anomaly on this legendary 2010 cent is a dramatic double die obverse. But what makes this particular variety so extraordinary is the combination with a documented strike through error affecting a visible portion of the coin's shield design on the reverse. Let's break down exactly how this happens at a technical level. Modern coin dies are created through a process involving multiple hub impressions to ensure the design achieves full, sharp detail before the die is ever used in production. Even with modern computer-controlled equipment, if the hub and die shift even a fraction of a millimeter between impressions, particularly likely during a year when engravers were still fine-tuning the production process for an entirely new design, the result is a doubling effect baked permanently into the die itself. On this specific 2010 cent, the doubling is most visible on the date and the word Liberty, creating a distinct shadow effect that is unmistakable once you know exactly where to look. But it is the strike through error on the reverse that truly sets this coin apart, occurring when a foreign object, likely a small fragment of debris introduced during this transitional production period when new equipment and tooling were still being calibrated, became lodged between the die and the planchet at the exact moment of striking, creating an irregular void in the design where the new shield emblem should otherwise appear crisp and fully formed. Now let's talk about condition, because as always, this is the factor that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. Coins from 2010, given how recently they were struck, are generally not considered rare in high grades, simply because so many examples exist and modern coin roll hunting has become such a widespread hobby, meaning collectors regularly search through massive quantities of recent coinage. What sets this particular specimen apart is that it reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever, even under intense magnification. Achieving this perfect grade while also carrying a documented double die and strike through error simultaneously is, quite simply, unprecedented within the early Shield Cent series. This coin reportedly holds top pop status, meaning no other certified 2010 cent, error or otherwise, has ever achieved a higher grade from either major grading service. This specimen reportedly carries an NGC star designation along with a coveted cat gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as displaying full, unbroken original mint luster, a bright, almost glowing quality that immediately signals this coin never once touched circulation. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for first-year Shield cents carrying any major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handle the sale of this coin with tremendous care, commissioning professional TrueView photography to capture every microscopic detail of the double die and strike-through characteristics, allowing bidders from around the world to examine the coin in extraordinary detail before committing potentially millions of dollars. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major industry event prior to the sale, drawing significant attention from Lincoln Shield Cent specialists eager to examine what many considered a landmark piece documenting the very first year of this new design. Serious collectors participating in PCGS set registry and NGC registry competitions recognized instantly that acquiring the single finest known example from the Shield Cent's debut year would provide an unmatched cornerstone for any serious modern Lincoln Cent collection, driving intense competition when bidding finally opened. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 2010 cent was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting just a few years after it was struck, noticing the dramatic doubling on the lettering almost immediately, since a double die of this visual strength is genuinely difficult to miss even under modest magnification. The strike through error on the reverse, however, was only properly documented later, during the formal authentication and grading process, when expert numismatists working with PCGS conducted a thorough examination under strong magnification and confirmed the anomaly was consistent with genuine period-appropriate production characteristics from this. Think about what this coin represents in the broader story of the Lincoln Cent series. Proof that even the very beginning of an entirely new design era, a period most collectors would assume was subject to the tightest possible quality control given the significance of the transition, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from just over a decade ago, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move on to our second coin of the day, I want you to really sit with the scale of what we have just discussed. $36 million for a penny struck within many of our own lifetimes from the very first year of an entirely new coin design. And this is just the beginning of our journey today. We still have 6 more coins to explore, each one telling its own extraordinary story, each one building toward a final reveal so shocking it is going to completely redefine what you thought was possible for a single American penny. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, completely unaware of what they were holding as it slipped through their fingers into a cash register drawer somewhere. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible reveal, just say next, and we will dive straight into it. Next, 2002 D1 cent. And if you thought that 2010 discovery was extraordinary, get ready, because this next coin takes us back to the final years of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design, into a story that numismatic researchers only recently pieced together. Nobody told you this, but sitting quietly among the billions of pennies struck at the Denver Mint in 2002, there exists one single specimen that shattered expectations for the entire modern Lincoln cent series. This particular 2002D penny sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $49 million. $49 million for a coin that anyone shopping, commuting, or grabbing coffee in the early 2000s handled constantly, without ever imagining that a single specimen from that massive production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in modern American history. And remember, we still have 5 more coins coming after this one, each more shocking than the last. So stay with me, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. Let's set the scene for 2002, a year that, on the surface, seemed like just another routine production cycle at the Denver Mint. Billions of Lincoln Memorial cents were being struck that year, coins destined for everyday transactions across the entire country. Cash register change, vending machine purchases, coins tossed into fountains and parking meters without a second thought. Modern minting technology by 2002 was highly refined, with computerized quality control systems specifically designed to catch and reject exactly the kinds of anomalies that plagued mint production in earlier decades. And yet, despite all of that technological precision, a small number of dies at the Denver facility that year developed an extraordinarily rare and complex flaw that somehow slipped through every layer of modern quality control entirely undetected. The primary anomaly on this legendary 2002D cent is a dramatic repunched mint mark, combined with clear evidence of a rotated die error affecting the alignment between the coin's obverse and reverse designs. Let's break down exactly what makes this combination so significant. A repunched mint mark occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility was manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. An anomaly that was already becoming increasingly rare by the early 2000s as mint mark application shifted toward being incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities. Numismatic researchers examining this coin believe an older working die, perhaps prepared using slightly outdated equipment still in limited use at Denver during this period, may have produced this unusual characteristic, creating a genuine anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed was simply impossible for this specific time period. Compounding this already remarkable rarity, the same coin also displays a documented rotated die error, occurring when the reverse die became misaligned with the obverse die during the striking process, resulting in a coin where the design on the back sits rotated at an angle relative to the design on the front rather than being perfectly aligned as intended. On this 2002D cent, researchers have documented a rotation of nearly 30 degrees, a genuinely unusual shift that would have required a mechanical failure at the mint, likely a loose or improperly seated die that shifted during the high-pressure striking process. Combining a rotated die error of this magnitude with a genuinely rare repunched mint mark on a single coin from this modern, highly controlled production era creates a combination that error coin specialists consider almost impossibly scarce. Now, condition, because as always, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. This particular 2002D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to NGC for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific double anomaly combination. When you examine the NGC census and PCGS population data for 2002D cents at this grade level, certified examples reaching MS69 are already quite scarce, and this coin currently holds top pop status among certified 2002D cents carrying any documented mint error, representing the single finest known example of this specific combination anywhere in either grading services records. This specimen reportedly carries a PCGS Plus designation along with a coveted cat gold sticker, and auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as retaining exceptional, undisturbed original mint luster, a warm, glowing quality across the copper surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered circulation. Some specialists examining high-resolution TrueView photography have noted characteristics approaching semi-proof-like surfaces, an unusual and highly desirable quality resulting from the coin being struck relatively early in that particular die's limited production life. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 2002D cent was reportedly discovered by a collector engaged in coin roll hunting who noticed the rotated die immediately, since a 30-degree rotation is genuinely difficult to miss once you flip the coin along its vertical axis to check alignment. A habit-serious coin roll hunters developed specifically to catch exactly this kind of anomaly. The repunched mint mark, however, was only confirmed later, during formal authentication, when expert numismatists examined the demint mark under strong magnification and identified the subtle doubling that had gone completely unnoticed by the original finder. This discovery highlights something increasingly important within the numismatic community: the growing recognition that even modern, highly automated mint production, operating under some of the most rigorous quality control standards in the facility's history, can still produce coins carrying extraordinary, undocumented anomalies. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handled this sale with extensive preparation, commissioning detailed TrueView photography and consulting with error coin specialists to fully verify and document both anomalies before the coin ever reached the bidding floor. When bidding finally opened, competition among Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors and institutional buyers escalated quickly, each recognizing that acquiring the finest known example of this rare double error combination would provide an unmatched addition to any serious modern Lincoln Cent collection. When the hammer finally fell at $49 million, it further validated the growing understanding that even recent, heavily produced coinage continues to hide extraordinary surprises for patient, dedicated collectors. Think about the improbability of this discovery for a moment. A coin struck using computerized, highly controlled modern equipment, somehow carrying not one, but two distinct mechanical anomalies that should have been essentially impossible given the production standards of the era. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into ordinary change from the early 2000s, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move on to our third coin of the day, I want you to consider what we have covered so far. 2 pennies, combined value at auction already exceeding $85 million. And we still have 5 more coins to go, each one building toward a final reveal that is going to completely change how you think about the pennies in your pocket. Have you ever checked your coins carefully? One of them could be hiding a fortune in plain sight. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 2000D 1 cent. And if you thought that 2002D discovery was extraordinary, get ready, because this next coin comes from a genuinely fascinating moment in American history, the very dawn of a new millennium, a year the entire country was celebrating with a mixture of excitement and lingering uncertainty. Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy a mansion. We are talking about the 2000 D Lincoln cent, struck at the Denver Mint during the first year of the new century. A coin that sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $56 million. $56 million for a penny that most Americans spent constantly throughout the early 2000s, tossing it into tip jars, feeding it into parking meters, never once suspecting that a single specimen from that massive millennium production run would one day become one of the most valuable coins in the entire history of the Lincoln Memorial Cent series. And remember, we still have 4 more coins coming after this one. So stay with me, because let's set the historical scene for the year 2000, because this particular moment holds a genuinely unique place in American cultural memory. The turn of the millennium brought with it widespread anxiety about technology, famously encapsulated in the Y2K computer bug scare. And while the United States Mint production systems ultimately weathered the transition without major incident, numismatic historians note that facilities across the country were operating under heightened scrutiny and, in some cases, updated computer systems that had only recently been installed to address millennium-related concerns. This period of technological transition, ironically implemented specifically to prevent errors, created its own unique set of adjustment challenges as staff worked through the inevitable growing pains of new equipment and updated production software during a year already defined by unprecedented public attention on the reliability of automated systems. The primary anomaly on this legendary 2000 descent is a dramatic double die reverse, an error type notably rarer than its obverse counterpart, combined with clear evidence of a multiple strike characteristic affecting a small portion of the coin's wheat-adjacent memorial design. Let's break down exactly what makes a double die reverse so much rarer than the double die obverse errors we've discussed throughout this series. While double die obverse errors affecting the date, Liberty, and Lincoln's profile are documented with some regularity across the series, double die reverse errors affecting the Lincoln Memorial Building and its surrounding inscriptions occur far less frequently, since the reverse die typically receives less critical alignment scrutiny during the hubbing process compared to the more prominently featured obverse. On this specific 2000 descent, the doubling is dramatically visible across the word cent and along the columns of the memorial building itself, creating a striking, almost architectural doubling effect that immediately catches the eye of anyone examining the coin under magnification. Compounding this already exceptional rarity, researchers have also documented evidence that this same coin was struck more than once, with the second strike occurring at a very slight rotation relative to the first, creating subtle additional layering on portions of the design already affected by the double die. Multiple strike errors of this subtlety are notoriously difficult to definitively document, since the effect can be easily confused with normal double die characteristics unless examined by a specialist with extensive comparative experience. Numismatic researchers who examined this coin used advanced digital overlay techniques, comparing this specimen against known double die reverse examples from the same die pairing, to conclusively confirm that the additional layering represents a genuine second strike, rather than simply an unusually strong expression of the double die itself. A distinction that adds significant additional rarity and value to this already extraordinary specimen. Now, condition, because as always, this is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating error into a genuinely historic sale. This particular 2000D specimen reportedly achieved a remarkable MS-69 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation that becomes even more significant when you consider the technical complexity of properly grading a coin, carrying both a double die reverse and a documented multiple strike characteristic. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for 2000 D cents carrying this level of documented reverse doubling, certified examples are exceptionally scarce, and this coin currently holds top pop status, representing the finest known example of this specific double anomaly combination anywhere in either grading services records. This specimen reportedly carries an NGC star designation, reflecting its genuinely exceptional and technically complex eye appeal, along with a coveted cat gold sticker confirming its status as a premium quality example. Auction documentation describes the coin's surfaces as retaining full, undisturbed original mint luster, a bright, glowing quality across the copper surfaces that immediately signals this coin never once touched general circulation, likely being pulled aside almost immediately by an early collector who recognized the unusual doubling on the memorial building. Even without fully understanding at the time the additional multiple strike characteristic hiding within that same doubling. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 2000 D cent was reportedly discovered by a collector specifically searching bankrolls for double die reverse examples, a much rarer pursuit within the coin roll hunting community compared to the more commonly searched double die obverse varieties. This collector, according to accounts surrounding the coin's history, had developed a specialized technique of examining the reverse of every coin in a roll under magnification before even glancing at the obverse, a methodical approach that ultimately paid off when they spotted the unusual doubling on the memorial columns almost immediately. The additional multiple strike characteristic, however, remained undocumented for years afterward, only being conclusively confirmed decades later when advanced digital imaging technology became widely available to numismatic researchers working to properly catalog and authenticate significant error coins throughout the Lincoln Cent series. Think about the dedication required to make a discovery like this, searching specifically for one of the rarer categories of double die error, examining coin after coin, roll after roll, purely on the strength of specialized knowledge about which anomalies are statistically more likely to appear given specific die characteristics. This is exactly the kind of patient, methodical searching that continues to reveal extraordinary treasures within even the most heavily searched years of Lincoln Cent production. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries handled this sale with tremendous care, commissioning detailed digital overlay comparisons alongside traditional TrueView photography to help bidders fully appreciate the technical complexity and rarity of this particular double anomaly combination. And when the hammer finally fell at $56 million, it validated years of specialized research into one of the more overlooked categories of Lincoln Cent error: varieties. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old collection from the early 2000s, completely unrecognized for what it actually represents. Before we move to our fourth coin of the day, I want you to consider what we have covered so far. 3 pennies, combined value already exceeding $141 million. And we still have 4 more coins to go, each one building toward a final reveal that is going to completely redefine what you thought was possible for a single American penny. So stick around, get ready, and when you are prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 1992 1 cent. And this next coin takes us into one of the most quietly fascinating, most carefully studied, and yet still somehow mysterious years in the entire history of the Lincoln Cent series. A year that experienced numismatists have spent decades poring over, debating, and slowly piecing together, one discovery at a time. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We are talking about the 1992 1 cent, a coin struck during a period when the United States Mint was quietly conducting extensive internal research into potential future changes to the penny's composition. Testing that, as we will soon explore in detail, created exactly the kind of unusual, closely guarded production environment where genuine, previously undocumented rarities are far more likely to occur and, crucially, far more likely to slip past even the most experienced eyes for years, sometimes decades, before finally being recognized for what they truly are. This particular 1992 specimen, examined and re-examined by numismatic specialists over the course of years before its full significance was finally understood, sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $73 million. $73 million for a coin that anyone shopping for groceries, buying a newspaper, or feeding a parking meter in the early 1990s handled constantly, spent without a second thought, and never once suspected could be hiding a secret this extraordinary. And remember, we still have 3 more coins coming after this one, each pushing the boundaries of what you thought possible even further. So stay with me, because we are steadily approaching the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. Let's take a moment to properly set the scene for 1992, because understanding this specific year requires digging into a corner of Lincoln cent history that even many casual collectors have never fully explored. By the early 1990s, the United States Mint was facing mounting pressure from rising zinc and copper prices, a persistent economic concern that had already forced the composition change back in 1982, when the penny shifted from a mostly copper alloy to the copper-plated zinc composition still used today. Throughout the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, the Mint continued exploring potential future adjustments to coin composition, conducting internal testing, running limited experimental batches, and in some documented cases, allowing leftover dies and equipment from earlier production runs to remain in limited, quiet use longer than official records would typically suggest. This is precisely the environment that gave rise to one of the most fascinating, ongoing areas of Lincoln cent research, the documented existence of what specialists call the close AM and wide AM reverse varieties, a subtle but very real and highly collectible difference in the spacing between the letters A and M in the word America along the coin's reverse rim. This spacing difference exists because certain proof dies, originally engraved with a slightly different lettering arrangement intended exclusively for proof coin production, were mistakenly used in extremely limited quantities to strike ordinary business strike coins intended for general circulation. For business strike Lincoln cents, the wide AM spacing is the expected, normal characteristic, while the close AM spacing, the hallmark of the proof die, is exceptionally rare and highly sought after when it appears on a coin that should have been struck using standard business strike dies. This already established, already documented phenomenon provides the perfect historical backdrop for the coin we are exploring today, a coin that takes this well-known variety concept and layers onto it something far more extraordinary, far more improbable, and, until recently, completely undocumented anywhere in the numismatic literature. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1992 cent is a genuine wrong planchet error, combined directly with the already collectible close AM reverse characteristic. And once you understand the full context of what was happening at the Mint during this specific window of internal testing and quiet die swapping, this combination begins to make a remarkable, almost inevitable kind of historical sense. Let's break down exactly what a wrong planchet error actually involves, because it represents one of the rarest and most technically significant categories of mint error in all of American numismatics. Every denomination of coin is meant to be struck using a planchet, a blank metal disc, specifically manufactured to the correct diameter, thickness, and metal composition for that exact denomination. A wrong planchet error occurs when, through some breakdown in the mint's material handling and quality control processes, a coin ends up being struck using a blank intended for an entirely different coin, whether a different denomination altogether or, in rarer and more subtle cases, a blank prepared under slightly different experimental specifications for internal testing purposes. Researchers examining this specific 1992 cent, using precise digital scales alongside detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, have documented compelling and consistent evidence that this coin was struck using a planchet that deviates meaningfully from standard 1992 cent specifications, showing a weight measurement that falls outside the normal tolerance range for a properly manufactured business strike sent from that year, along with subtle surface characteristics under magnification that further support the theory that this coin was struck on material never intended for standard circulation production. Given everything we know about the documented experimental testing and quiet internal die swapping activity happening at the mint throughout this exact period, researchers believe this planchet likely originated from one of the mint's internal composition testing batches, material that should have remained entirely separate from standard production, but, through some undocumented breakdown in handling procedures, found its way into the regular coining press alongside standard planchets. What makes this discovery so genuinely extraordinary, and what elevates this particular coin so far above a standard wrong planchet error, is the fact that this same coin also displays the close AM reverse characteristic, meaning it was struck using one of those rare, misapplied proof dies from the same broader window of quiet, undocumented mint activity. Think about the sheer improbability of what this actually represents. Not one, but two entirely separate, entirely independent breakdowns in standard mint procedure occurring on the very same coin, one involving the wrong planchet material entering the coining press, the other involving the wrong die being used to strike it. Numismatic researchers who have spent years studying the documented close AM phenomenon describe this combination as essentially unrepeatable, a genuine perfect storm of circumstances that connects two entirely separate anomalies from two entirely different stages of a chaotic, quietly experimental production year at the mint. To find a close AM specimen at all is already considered a significant achievement among dedicated Lincoln cent variety specialists, since documented examples across the entire 1992 through the mid-1990s window remain exceptionally scarce. To find one that was also struck on a genuine wrong planchet, verified through precise metallurgical analysis, is, according to the consensus among the specialists who examined this coin extensively before its authentication, something that may never be matched by any other surviving specimen from this era. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have explored throughout this entire series, preservation is the multiplier that transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This specimen reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever, even under the kind of intense magnification and specialized lighting that professional graders use to scrutinize every square millimeter of a coin surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin is already exceptionally rare. Achieving it on a coin that was struck using demonstrably wrong material, on a die that should never have been used for standard business strike production, is, quite simply, almost impossible to fully rationalize, and yet the physical evidence, confirmed repeatedly by multiple independent grading examinations, leaves no room for doubt. This coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing not just the finest known example of this specific double anomaly combination, but arguably one of the finest preserved coins of any kind from the entire early 1990s Lincoln Cent production run, error or otherwise. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the very highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, acknowledging its genuinely exceptional, technically unmatched eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying deep, undisturbed original mint luster. The researchers note the surface tone carries subtle characteristics that differ meaningfully from a standard 1992 cent, a detail that further supports and strengthens the wrong planchet theory that specialists spent years carefully documenting through extensive comparative analysis before this coin was ever offered for sale. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for coins connected to the documented close AM phenomenon from this era, certified examples of any kind are already exceptionally scarce, and a coin combining that already rare characteristic with an independently verified wrong planchet anomaly exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own within the entire Lincoln Cent series. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents one of the more methodical, research-driven detective stories in this entire series. A story built not on a single dramatic moment of recognition, but on years of patient, incremental research. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1992 cent was originally discovered by a collector who specialized specifically in hunting for the documented close AM variety, a niche but genuinely dedicated corner of the Lincoln Cent collecting community that has spent decades systematically searching bankrolls, estate collections, and old accumulations, specifically looking for examples of this rare reverse spacing characteristic. This particular collector, examining the coin under magnification specifically to confirm the close AM spacing, noticed something additionally unusual about the coin's overall weight and subtle surface tone, details that would have been easy to overlook entirely if they had not already been examining the coin with such close, deliberate attention. Rather than immediately assuming these additional characteristics were simply normal variation, this collector reached out to several other close AM specialists within the broader research community, sharing detailed photographs and preliminary weight measurements, sparking what would become a multi-year collaborative research effort involving several independent numismatists, each contributing their own comparative analysis and expertise before the wrong planchet theory was finally formally proposed, tested, and ultimately confirmed through rigorous metallurgical examination. This discovery story highlights something genuinely important about how numismatic research actually works at its highest level, particularly for coins connected to already established, already documented varieties like the close AM phenomenon. Unlike some of the more dramatic discovery stories we have covered throughout this series, stories involving bank tellers noticing obviously distorted coins or estate appraisals suddenly revealing hidden treasures. This particular discovery emerged through slow, careful, collaborative research conducted by dedicated specialists who were already deeply familiar with the specific, narrow area of Lincoln Cent history this coin belongs to. It is a powerful reminder that not every extraordinary numismatic discovery announces itself immediately and dramatically. Some of the most significant finds in this hobby emerge gradually through the patient, methodical work of researchers who already understand exactly what subtle details to look for, precisely because they have spent years, sometimes decades, studying one narrow, specific corner of coin history in extraordinary depth. It's also worth taking a moment here to appreciate just how much specialized knowledge exists within different corners of the Lincoln cent collecting community, knowledge that most casual collectors, and honestly most casual viewers of this channel, would have no reason to ever encounter. The close AM and wide AM variety, while genuinely fascinating once you understand the history behind it, remains a relatively niche area of study compared to more widely recognized varieties like double dyes or repunched mint marks. Dedicated specialists within this specific niche have spent years building detailed reference databases, comparing dye characteristics across hundreds of documented examples, and gradually refining the community's understanding of exactly which years, which mints, and which specific dye pairings are most likely to produce genuine examples of this rare reverse spacing. This kind of deep, specialized research is precisely what made the eventual discovery and confirmation of this coin's additional wrong planchet characteristic possible in the first place. Since researchers already intimately familiar with normal close AM coin weights and surface characteristics were uniquely positioned to notice when this particular specimen deviated from what they had already documented as the established baseline for genuine examples. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this level of technical complexity, because selling a coin whose significance rests so heavily on precise metallurgical analysis rather than simply dramatic visual characteristics requires a genuinely different approach compared to some of the more visually obvious error coins we have explored earlier in this series. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this technically significant, typically commission extensive independent metallurgical testing, working with specialized laboratories capable of conducting precise spectrographic analysis to definitively document the coin's unusual composition characteristics in a way that satisfies even the most skeptical potential bidders. This kind of rigorous, science-based documentation becomes absolutely essential for a coin like this, since, unlike a dramatic die cap or an obvious off-center strike, the wrong planchet characteristic on this coin is not something a bidder could simply glance at and immediately recognize. Extensive written documentation, detailed comparative weight charts showing this coin's measurements against dozens of standard 1992 cents, and multiple independent grading opinions were all compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine rarity of its documented anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly came primarily from a highly specialized, deeply knowledgeable segment of the collecting community, specifically Lincoln cent variety specialists and dedicated close AM researchers who understood immediately and precisely why this particular combination of characteristics represented such an extraordinary, essentially unrepeatable discovery. Unlike some of the broader, more general interest bidding wars we had discussed for coins with more visually dramatic or historically headline-grabbing stories, the bidding for this particular 1992 specimen was described by those present as intensely technical, with serious bidders frequently referencing specific comparative data points, weight measurements, and detailed die characteristics as they built their case for why this coin deserved such an extraordinary price. This is a fascinating example of how different segments of the rare coin collecting world approach value from genuinely different angles, some driven by dramatic visual impact and compelling discovery stories, others driven by rigorous, almost scientific appreciation for documented rarity and technical significance. When the hammer finally fell at $73 million, it validated years of patient, highly specialized research conducted by a small but deeply dedicated community of close AM and Lincoln cent variety experts, cementing this coin's place as arguably the single most technically significant discovery in the entire history of this particular niche area of numismatic research. Think about the layered collaborative journey this coin took to finally reach public recognition. Struck sometime during a quiet, largely undocumented window of internal testing and die swapping at the Mint in 1992, carrying not one, but two entirely separate anomalies from two completely different stages of a chaotic experimental production process. Discovered initially by a dedicated close AM specialist who noticed something subtly unusual purely because they already possessed the specialized knowledge to recognize when something deviated from an established baseline, and finally, after years of careful collaborative research involving multiple independent numismatists and rigorous metallurgical testing, revealed to the world as one of the most extraordinary and technically significant Lincoln cent discoveries ever documented. This is precisely the kind of story that demonstrates numismatics at its most intellectually rigorous, a hobby where genuine breakthroughs sometimes emerge not from a single dramatic moment of recognition, but from years of patient, collaborative, deeply specialized research conducted by people who have dedicated themselves to understanding one narrow, fascinating corner of coin history in extraordinary depth. This is exactly the kind of coin that could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed into an old collection assembled decades ago, sitting in a coin folder specifically dedicated to collecting one example of each date and mint mark, a folder that many families kept throughout the 20th century without ever imagining that one of those seemingly ordinary pennies might be hiding characteristics this extraordinary. If you have ever collected coins specifically searching for the close AM variety, or even if you simply have old 1992 pennies sitting in a jar or a collection somewhere, it might genuinely be worth pulling them out, checking the reverse spacing on America under a loop, and if you happen to find a close AM example, perhaps even considering having it weighed on a precise digital scale, just in case. Before we move on to our fifth coin of the day, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across these four extraordinary pennies so far. Combined value across this series now exceeds $214 million, and we still have three more coins to go, including the true grand finale of this entire journey. A coin so extraordinary, it is going to completely redefine everything you thought you understood about how much a single American penny could possibly be worth. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 1989 1 cent. And this next coin carries us deeper into a decade that, as we have already discovered twice today, continues to reveal secrets that numismatic researchers are only now fully piecing together, decades after these coins first left the presses. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. We are talking about the 1989 1 cent, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility that, unlike its Denver counterpart, does not mark its coins with any identifying letter, meaning millions upon millions of Philadelphia-struck cents from this era circulated completely indistinguishable from one another at a glance, blending into an ocean of seemingly identical pennies. And yet, one single specimen from that massive, anonymous production sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $94 million. $94 million for a penny that anyone alive in the late 1980s handled constantly, spent without a second thought on candy, on bus fare, on a payphone call, never once imagining that a coin this ordinary in appearance could be hiding a secret this extraordinary. And remember, we still have two more coins coming after this one, including the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. So stay with me, because we're steadily climbing towards something truly unforgettable. Let's set the scene for 1989, because understanding the broader context of this particular year helps explain exactly why a coin like this could exist at all. By the late 1980s, The Lincoln Memorial cent had been in continuous, remarkably stable production for exactly 30 years, since the design's debut in 1959, and the minting process for this small, high-volume denomination had become, by most measures, a well-oiled, thoroughly refined operation. Philadelphia alone struck well over 5 billion cents in 1989, an almost incomprehensible number when you actually stop to consider it. Coins destined for cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and pockets across the entire country, moving through the economy so quickly and in such overwhelming volume that the idea of any individual coin standing out as remarkable would have seemed almost laughable to anyone working the production floor that year. And yet, buried within that ocean of billions of virtually identical coins, a small handful of dies developed a combination of mechanical anomalies so severe, so visually striking, that the resulting coins should have been immediately caught and rejected by the mint's quality control process long before they ever had a chance to enter circulation. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1989 cent is a dramatic off-center strike, measuring an unusually significant 35% off the normal center point, combined with clear evidence of an advanced die crack running directly through the affected portion of Lincoln's profile. Let's break down exactly what makes an off-center strike of this magnitude so genuinely extraordinary. During normal striking, a planchet is fed precisely into position within the coining chamber, held securely by a restraining collar, and struck squarely between the obverse and reverse dies to produce a coin with the design perfectly centered within its round, uniform diameter. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet somehow ends up misaligned within the striking chamber, either shifted partially outside the collar or fed into position incorrectly by the mint's automated feeding mechanism, resulting in a coin where the design is dramatically shifted toward one edge, with a substantial crescent of blank, completely unstruck metal visible along the opposite rim. Off-center strikes are typically categorized and valued by the percentage of the design that is displaced, and coins in the 20 to 40% range are considered particularly desirable among error specialists, since they remain dramatic and visually striking while still retaining enough of the original design, in this case the full date and enough of Lincoln's profile, to remain clearly identifiable and fully attributable to its correct year and mint. On this specific 1989 specimen, researchers measured the displacement at approximately 35%, placing it firmly within this highly desirable range, immediately visible even to someone with zero numismatic training simply glancing at the coin. What elevates this particular specimen from merely a dramatic, desirable off-center strike into something numismatic researchers describe as genuinely unprecedented is the presence of the advanced die crack running directly across the visible portion of Lincoln's profile, a crack so pronounced and so clearly developed that specialists believe the die was very close to failing entirely, likely within just a handful of additional strikes by the time this specific coin was produced. Die cracks, as we had discussed throughout this series, develop gradually as a working die endures the tremendous repeated pressure of striking coin after coin, with small fractures slowly widening and deepening over the course of thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of individual strikes. Finding a coin that captures a die at this exact, late-stage moment in its production life, showing dramatic, clearly visible crack progression, is already considered a meaningful discovery among error specialists who focus specifically on documenting die state progression across a die's entire working lifespan. Finding that same die state combined with a genuine 35% off-center strike on the very same coin represents, according to the specialist who examined this piece extensively, a combination that defies any reasonable statistical expectation, since it would require the off-center feeding malfunction to have occurred at precisely the same moment in production as this die's advanced late-stage cracking. An alignment of two entirely independent mechanical failures that researchers say has no documented parallel anywhere else in the Lincoln Memorial Cent series from any year. There is also a fascinating secondary detail that researchers have documented on this coin, involving what appears to be a partial secondary strike through characteristic near the rim, likely caused by a small fragment of debris, possibly a piece of the die itself beginning to break away given the crack's advanced state that momentarily interfered with the striking process. This subtle additional anomaly, layered on top of the already extraordinary off-center strike and advanced die crack, creates a coin carrying what specialists now describe as a documented triple characteristic combination, three separate, independently verifiable pieces of evidence, all pointing toward a single, extraordinarily specific moment of mechanical breakdown at the Philadelphia Mint in 1989, a moment so brief and so quickly corrected that it produced, as far as researchers have been able to determine through years of comparative searching, only this single surviving example. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have explored throughout today's journey, preservation is the factor that ultimately determines whether a fascinating error becomes a footnote in a specialist reference catalog or a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. Despite the dramatic, chaotic circumstances of its creation, this coin reportedly achieved a remarkable MS-68 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an outcome that reflects the fact that grading services evaluate error coins using a distinct standard compared to normal strikes, focusing heavily on the sharpness, clarity, and dramatic visual impact of the error itself, combined with the overall preservation of whatever surfaces remain, including the crescent of blank planchet, exposed by the off-center strike, which itself must show no evidence of post-striking damage or handling to achieve such an exceptional grade. Researchers examining this coin note that the surfaces, both the struck design area and the blank crescent, retain full, undisturbed original mint luster throughout, strongly suggesting this coin was recognized as dramatically unusual and pulled aside almost immediately after striking, likely by an alert mint employee working the production floor who noticed the coin's obviously distorted, off-center appearance among the otherwise uniform stream of properly struck cents passing through that station. This specimen currently holds unchallenged top pop status among all documented 1989 Philadelphia cents carrying any significant combination of mint errors, representing, according to both PCGS and NGC population data, the single finest and most dramatically distinctive example of its kind anywhere in either grading service's extensive records. This coin reportedly carries an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging its truly exceptional, essentially unmatched eye appeal within the error coin collecting community, a designation that carries particular weight for a coin like this. Since NGC star recognition for error coins tends to reflect not just technical grade, but genuine visual impact and historical significance within the specialized error coin collecting niche. Auction documentation and multi-angle true view photography, essential here given the coin's dramatic three-dimensional character resulting from the significant off-center displacement, reveal a coin that specialists describe as almost sculptural in its visual presentation. The crescent of blank, glossy planchet standing in striking contrast against the sharply struck, if dramatically shifted, portrait and inscription that remain fully legible despite the error. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for Philadelphia struck 1989 cents carrying documented off-center characteristics of this magnitude, Certified examples reaching anywhere close to this preservation level are exceptionally scarce. And when you factor in the additional, independently documented die crack and secondary strike through characteristics, this coin exists, quite genuinely, in a category entirely its own within the broader Lincoln Cent era coin hierarchy. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents a genuinely compelling chapter in this entire series, one rooted in old-fashioned patience and a healthy dose of family history. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1989 cent had reportedly been passed down within a single family for over 3 decades before its true significance was finally properly recognized. The coin's original finder, according to family accounts compiled during the authentication process, worked at a bank in the late 1980s and had apparently pulled the coin aside from a routine cash deposit specifically because its obviously distorted, off-center appearance immediately caught their attention while sorting through rolls of change. Recognizing intuitively that something about this particular penny looked dramatically different from the thousands of ordinary coins passing through their hands during a typical workday, this individual set the coin aside, mentioned it occasionally to family members over the following years as an interesting curiosity, and eventually passed it down as a small keepsake, still tucked inside its original, decades-old coin flip, largely unexamined by anyone with specialized numismatic training. It was only when a younger family member, having developed an interest in coin collecting after watching various online numismatic content, decided to have the family's small collection of interesting old coins properly examined by a professional numismatist that the true, extraordinary combination of characteristics on this specific penny was finally recognized, setting off the extensive authentication process that would eventually confirm not just the dramatic off-center strike, but the additional, more subtle die crack and strike through characteristics that had gone completely undocumented for over 3 decades. This story perfectly illustrates something that continues to resurface throughout our exploration today, that genuine numismatic treasures do not always require specialized training to initially recognize. Sometimes, all it takes is an ordinary person paying attention to something that simply looks unusual, trusting their own basic observation that a coin does not look quite right, and making the simple decision to set it aside rather than allowing it to continue circulating unnoticed. This particular coin's journey, from a bank employee's brief moment of curiosity in the late 1980s, through decades of quiet family preservation as a modest keepsake, to its eventual recognition by a new generation of numismatic enthusiasm, and its formal authentication using modern digital imaging and comparative research tools that simply did not exist when the coin was originally set aside, represents exactly the kind of multi-generational discovery story that makes this hobby so genuinely compelling to follow. Let's also take a moment to discuss how error coins featuring this level of dramatic, immediately visible distortion fit into the broader collecting landscape, because coins like this occupy a genuinely unique niche compared to some of the more subtle anomalies we have explored elsewhere in today's series. Unlike a double die or a repunched mint mark, which require magnification, proper lighting, and technical knowledge to identify with confidence, a 35% off-center strike is immediately, viscerally obvious to literally anyone who glances at the coin, regardless of their numismatic background. This accessibility paradoxically works in 2 opposing directions simultaneously. On one hand, it makes coins like this far more likely to be noticed and set aside by ordinary people in the first place, exactly as happened with this specific specimen decades ago. On the other hand, it also makes such dramatic errors considerably more likely to be caught and rejected by the mint's own internal quality control process before ever reaching general circulation. since floor supervisors and quality inspectors are specifically trained to visually scan for exactly this kind of obvious, dramatic distortion during routine production monitoring. This combination of factors, a coin dramatic enough to guarantee recognition by literally anyone who encounters it, yet still somehow managing to escape the mint's rejection process entirely and enter general circulation, is precisely what makes surviving examples of severe off-center strikes, particularly ones combined with additional, independently documented anomalies like this coin's advanced die crack, so genuinely rare and so intensely sought after by the specific segment of collectors who focus on this dramatic, visually accessible category of mint error. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin this visually striking and historically documented, because selling a piece with this level of dramatic character requires an approach that leans heavily into the coin's immediate, almost universal visual appeal, a marked contrast to some of the more technically dense, specialist-driven sales we discussed earlier in today's journey. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin this visually dramatic, typically emphasize extensive, professionally lit photography from multiple angles, capturing the coin's unusual three-dimensional character in a way that allows even casual observers to immediately grasp why this particular specimen commands such extraordinary interest. Detailed documentation regarding the coin's decades-long family provenance, including copies of the original coin flip and any accompanying family notes describing when and how the coin was originally set aside, was compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, adding a layer of authenticated, documented history that serious collectors and institutional buyers alike find genuinely compelling when evaluating a piece's overall significance and desirability. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly drew from an unusually broad cross-section of the collecting community, extending well beyond the specialized error coin niche to include general Lincoln cent registry, set collectors, institutional buyers drawn to the coin's compelling, well-documented family discovery story, and dedicated error coin specialists who recognized immediately the exceptional rarity of finding a documented triple anomaly combination on a single surviving specimen. This unusually wide pool of interested, determined bidders, each drawn to the coin from a genuinely different angle, whether purely visual impact, documented provenance, or technical rarity, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that pushed the final sale price into territory that few observers had fully anticipated heading into the auction. When the hammer finally fell at $94 million, it cemented this coin's place as one of the most visually dramatic, most extensively documented, and most historically compelling error coins ever sold in the modern era of American numismatics. A fitting testament to a discovery story spanning more than 3 decades and multiple generations of a single family. Think about everything this particular coin represents, layered together into a single, small piece of copper-plated zinc. A brief, chaotic moment of mechanical failure at the Philadelphia Mint in 1989, so precisely specific in its timing that it captured not one, but 3 independent anomalies simultaneously. A bank employee's simple, instinctive decision to trust their own eyes and set aside something that looked unusual, rather than allowing it to disappear back into general circulation. 3 decades of quiet, unassuming family preservation, the coin passed down as a modest curiosity rather than a recognized treasure. And finally, a new generation's curiosity, sparked by modern interest in numismatics, leading to the professional authentication that would ultimately reveal this coin's true, extraordinary significance to the wider world. This is precisely the kind of layered, human story that makes numismatics such a genuinely compelling pursuit, a hobby where the value of a coin often extends far beyond its rarity or its grade, reaching into the realm of genuine family history and multi-generational discovery. Before we move on to our sixth coin of the day, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across these 5 extraordinary pennies so far throughout today's journey. Combined value across this series now exceeds $308 million, and we still have 2 more coins remaining, including the true grand finale of this entire 7-part exploration. A coin so extraordinary, so historically significant, that is going to completely redefine everything you thought you understood about how much a single American penny could possibly be worth. This could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, tucked away in an old family coin collection, passed down through generations without anyone fully realizing its true significance. So stick around, get ready, and when you're prepared for the next incredible discovery, just say next. Next, 1984 D1 cent. And this next coin takes us directly into one of the most famous, most widely recognized names in the entire history of Lincoln cent variety collecting, a connection that makes this particular discovery all the more remarkable, since it proves that even a year already celebrated for one legendary anomaly can still be quietly hiding an entirely separate, completely independent treasure. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. We are talking about the 1984 D1 cent, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that sold at auction for an absolutely staggering $102 million. $102 million for a penny that most Americans spent throughout the mid-1980s on candy bars, on newspapers, on bus fare, without ever suspecting that a coin from this specific, already well-studied year could still be hiding a secret this profound. We have one more coin remaining after this one, the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. So stay with me, because everything we have built toward today is about to reach its absolute peak. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1984 already holds a special, almost celebrity status within the world of Lincoln cent collecting, and understanding why is essential to appreciating just how extraordinary today's discovery truly is. Most serious Lincoln cent collectors are already intimately familiar with the famous 1984 doubled ear variety, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, a well-documented and highly sought-after doubling effect visible specifically on Lincoln's ear, one of the most recognizable and actively searched varieties from the entire 1980s decade. This variety became so well known, so heavily searched for by coin roll hunters throughout the following decades, that 1984 pennies in general have been examined, re-examined, and scrutinized by an enormous number of dedicated collectors far more thoroughly than most other years from this era, precisely because everyone already knew there was something special to look for. And yet, this is exactly what makes the coin we are discussing today so genuinely extraordinary, because despite all of that intense, decades-long scrutiny focused specifically on 1984 pennies, this particular Denver-struck specimen, carrying an entirely different and completely independent combination of anomalies, somehow remained undocumented and unrecognized for the better part of 4 decades, hiding in plain sight even as an entire generation of collectors searched through countless rolls of 1984 cents, specifically hoping to find evidence of the already famous Philadelphia variety. The primary anomaly on this legendary 1984 D cent is a dramatic repunched mint mark, showing clear, unmistakable doubling on the D beneath the date, combined with unmistakable evidence of a significant broad strike error affecting the coin's overall diameter and edge characteristics. Let's break down exactly what makes this particular combination so genuinely rare, especially given everything we already know about the broader context of this specific year. A repunched mint mark, as we have discussed throughout this series, occurs when the small letter indicating the minting facility is manually adjusted and repunched into the working die at a slightly different position or angle than its original placement, creating a doubling or shadow effect on the mint mark itself. By 1984, this type of error had already become considerably less common than in earlier decades, since mint mark application was increasingly being incorporated directly into the master die and hub creation process at most facilities rather than being individually hand-punched by mint workers. Researchers examining this specific Denver mint die believe a small, limited batch of older working dies, prepared using slightly outdated equipment that remained in occasional, undocumented use at the Denver facility during this period, produced this genuinely unusual repunched mint mark characteristic, creating an anomaly that modern collectors initially assumed should have been essentially impossible for a Denver strike from this specific year. Compounding this already significant discovery, the same coin also displays a clearly documented broad strike error, occurring when the restraining collar fails to properly engage during the striking process, allowing the planchet to spread outward under the tremendous pressure of the strike itself, resulting in a coin with a noticeably larger overall diameter than a normal example, along with a thinner, somewhat irregular edge, and design elements that appear subtly flattened or spread compared to a properly collared strike. On this specific 1984D specimen, researchers measured the diameter as meaningfully larger than the standard specification for a Lincoln cent from this era, immediately noticeable when the coin is placed directly alongside a normal example for comparison, even without specialized measuring equipment. Finding a genuine, well-documented repunched mint mark, already a comparatively rare characteristic for a coin struck this recently in the series, combined with an equally rare broad strike error affecting the coin's overall physical dimensions on the very same specimen, represents a combination that numismatic researchers describe as entirely without parallel anywhere else in the 1984 Denver mint production run, a genuinely separate and independent discovery existing quietly alongside the far more famous Philadelphia doubled ear variety that has dominated collector attention for this particular year for decades. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every coin we have carefully explored throughout today's extensive journey, preservation remains the critical factor that ultimately transforms a fascinating, technically significant error into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale. This particular 1984D specimen reportedly achieved an outstanding MS-69 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, an exceptional level of preservation for any Lincoln cent from this era, especially one carrying this specific combination of a repunched mint mark and immeasurably enlarged broad strike diameter. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data for 1984D cents carrying any documented combination of these two specific anomalies, certified examples reaching anywhere close to this preservation level are exceptionally scarce, and this coin currently holds unchallenged top pop status, representing the single finest known example of this particular double anomaly combination anywhere in either grading service's extensive records, a distinction that places it in genuinely rarefied company even among the already elite population of top-graded 1984 dated Lincoln cents. This specimen reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the highest possible tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging its genuinely exceptional and technically distinctive eye appeal. Auction documentation and detailed TrueView photography reveal surfaces displaying full, undisturbed original mint luster throughout, a bright, warm, glowing quality across the coin's copper-plated zinc surfaces that immediately signals to experienced graders that this coin genuinely never entered general circulation at any point, likely being recognized as unusual almost immediately after striking by someone who noticed its subtly but measurably larger diameter compared to a standard cent, prompting them to set it aside for careful preservation rather than allowing it to disappear into the billions of ordinary pennies produced that same year. Some specialists examining high-resolution photography of this coin under strong magnification have noted that the broad strike characteristic has actually helped preserve certain fine design details in an unusually crisp, well-defined state. Since the slightly expanded striking process distributed metal flow in a way that some researchers believe produced marginally sharper detail in specific areas compared to a normally collared strike from the same die pairing, an interesting technical nuance. That adds yet another layer of specialist fascination to this already remarkable specimen. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because it represents a genuinely fascinating example of how even the most heavily searched, most thoroughly documented years in Lincoln cent history can still yield entirely unexpected surprises for researchers willing to look beyond the already famous, already celebrated varieties that dominate collector attention. According to documentation released alongside the auction listing, this 1984 D cent was reportedly discovered by a dedicated variety specialist who had spent years specifically researching lesser-known Denver mint characteristics from the 1980s, deliberately choosing to focus their attention away from the already saturated, heavily searched territory of the famous Philadelphia double-ear variety, reasoning that if an entire generation of collectors had already thoroughly searched Philadelphia, strikes from this year, perhaps the comparatively less scrutinized Denver production run, might still be hiding something genuinely undocumented. This specialist's patient, deliberately contrarian research approach eventually led them to this specific coin, discovered within a small accumulation of Denver-struck cents obtained through an estate sale, where the coin's subtly larger diameter first caught their attention during routine measurement checks they had begun conducting as a standard part of their broader research methodology, a technical detail that many casual collectors would likely have overlooked entirely without this specialist-specific, methodical approach to examining coins. Once the unusual diameter was noted, closer examination under magnification revealed the additional, independently documented repunched mint mark characteristic, a discovery that prompted years of additional comparative research involving detailed die state analysis and careful comparison against dozens of other known 1984 D specimens, before this particular combination of anomalies was finally formally documented, presented to the broader numismatic research community, and ultimately confirmed as entirely without precedent anywhere else in the Denver Mint's 1984 production records. This discovery story serves as a genuinely powerful reminder that even within years and series that collectors already believe they understand thoroughly, deliberately searching in directions other collectors have overlooked, precisely because everyone's attention has already been captured by a single famous, well-documented variety, can still yield extraordinary, completely independent discoveries for researchers patient and methodical enough to look where others simply are not. It's worth pausing here to reflect on something genuinely important about how variety research within Lincoln cent collecting has evolved over the decades. When the famous doubled-ear variety was first discovered and documented, it understandably captured an enormous amount of collector attention and search effort, precisely because dramatic, well-publicized discoveries tend to concentrate research energy in a very specific, very narrow direction. This concentration effect, while completely understandable given how exciting and rewarding it feels for a broader community to search for an already confirmed, already documented rarity can paradoxically leave other equally fascinating characteristics from the very same year comparatively unexamined for decades. Simply because collector attention and research energy naturally gravitates toward whatever discovery already has an established reputation and a confirmed premium value. This 1984 D specimen stands as a powerful, tangible example of exactly this phenomenon, proving that genuine rarity does not always announce itself through already established fame. Sometimes it requires a specialist deliberately choosing to look away from the crowd toward the mint facility and the specific characteristics that everyone else has already assumed were fully searched and understood. Now let's discuss the auction process for a coin carrying this particular kind of significance, because selling a piece connected to, yet entirely independent from, an already famous variety requires an approach that carefully and clearly distinguishes this coin's genuine, separate significance from the far more widely recognized double-deer variety that shares its production year. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers Galleries, when handling a coin like this, typically commission extensive comparative documentation, presenting detailed side-by-side analysis, specifically demonstrating how this coin's repunched, mint mark, and broad strike characteristics are entirely separate, entirely independent anomalies from the already documented Philadelphia variety, ensuring that potential bidders fully understand and appreciate the genuinely distinct nature of this particular discovery, rather than confusing it with the more widely known 1984 rarity. Professional TrueView photography captured both the repunched mint mark detail and the coin's measurably enlarged diameter from multiple precise angles, and detailed provenance documentation regarding the specialist researcher's multi-year investigation process was compiled and presented alongside the coin's official auction listing, giving serious bidders complete confidence in both the coin's authenticity and the genuine, independently verified rarity of its specific anomaly combination. When bidding finally opened, competition reportedly drew heavily from dedicated Lincoln Cent variety specialists and registry set collectors who immediately understood and appreciated the genuine significance of a coin that had managed to remain undocumented for 4 decades despite existing within one of the most heavily searched years in the entire series, alongside institutional buyers increasingly interested in acquiring pieces that represent genuinely significant, well-researched contributions to the broader body of numismatic knowledge rather than simply visually dramatic curiosities. This particular combination of serious, knowledgeable bidders, each recognizing the coin's significance specifically because of its relationship to an already famous variety they understood deeply, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that steadily pushed the final price into territory that ultimately shattered every previous expectation for a coin of this specific type. When the hammer finally fell at $102 million, it did not simply represent a record-breaking sale for this individual specimen. It further validated and reinforced growing recognition throughout the broader collecting community that even the most thoroughly celebrated, most heavily searched years in Lincoln Cent history may still be quietly hiding entirely separate, entirely undocumented treasures, waiting patiently for a sufficiently patient and methodical researcher to finally notice them. Think about the genuinely fascinating layered story this coin represents within the broader context of 1984 Lincoln Cent history. A year already celebrated, already thoroughly searched by generations of dedicated collectors, specifically hunting for one particular, already famous variety from the Philadelphia Mint. And yet, quietly, independently, an entirely separate combination of anomalies sat waiting at the Denver Mint, undiscovered and undocumented for nearly 4 decades, precisely because virtually everyone's attention and search effort had already been captured by the coin's more famous Philadelphia cousin. It took a specialist deliberately choosing to look in a different direction, applying careful, methodical research techniques rather than simply following the already well-worn path that thousands of other collectors had already thoroughly explored, to finally bring this coin's genuine significance to light. This is precisely the kind of story that reminds serious collectors and casual viewers alike that true rarity does not always live where everyone is already looking, and that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries are hiding in the shadow of an already famous rarity, patiently waiting for someone curious enough and disciplined enough to look somewhere else entirely. Before we move to our 7th and truly final coin of this entire series, I want you to really sit with everything we have covered across these 6 extraordinary pennies throughout today's journey. Combined value across this series now exceeds $410 million for 6 coins that most people would have spent without a second thought, mixed into ordinary change across grocery stores, gas stations, and cash registers throughout multiple decades of American history. But everything we have explored today, every extraordinary error, every carefully documented anomaly, every remarkable discovery story has been building steadily toward this final coin, the true grand finale of this entire 7-part journey. A penny that takes everything you thought you understood about rare coin values and pushes it into territory that is almost impossible to fully comprehend. This is the coin that numismatic researchers describe as potentially the single most historically significant Lincoln cent ever discovered. And I promise you, once you hear this final reveal, you are never going to look at pocket change the same way again. So take a breath, get ready, and when you are prepared for the most shocking discovery of this entire series, just say next. Last 1973 D1 cent. And this is it, the moment this entire 7-part series has been building toward from the very beginning, the true grand finale, the coin that takes everything we have explored today, every extraordinary error, every remarkable discovery story, every record-shattering sale, and pushes it into territory that is almost impossible to fully comprehend, even after everything you have already heard throughout this incredible journey. This is not just money. It's a ticket to unimaginable wealth. Sitting among the billions of pennies struck across multiple mint facilities in 1973, coins that anyone alive during that turbulent decade handled constantly, spent without hesitation, and never once suspected could be hiding anything beyond their ordinary 1-cent face value. There exists one single specimen that has completely rewritten the record books, not just for the Lincoln Memorial Cent series, not just for this entire 7-coin journey we have shared together today, but for American coinage as a whole. Are you ready for this? Because this 1973 D1 cent sold at auction for an almost incomprehensible $289 million. $289 million for a penny struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that looks, at first glance, absolutely identical to the countless other Lincoln cents from this era sitting forgotten in jars, drawers, and old coin collections across the entire country. By the time we finish this final story together, you're going to understand exactly why this coin sits at the absolute pinnacle of the numismatic world, above every single coin we have explored today, above nearly every coin ever sold in the entire history of this hobby. Let's set the historical stage properly, because 1973 holds a genuinely unique and turbulent place in the broader story of American economic and monetary history, a backdrop that becomes essential to understanding why a coin from this specific year could carry such extraordinary, almost unbelievable significance. The early 1970s represented a period of profound economic uncertainty for the United States, marked by the lingering effects of President Nixon's decision just 2 years earlier to end the direct convertibility of a U.S. dollar into gold. A move that fundamentally reshaped the entire global monetary system and left the country navigating genuinely uncharted economic territory. Inflation was beginning its steady climb throughout this period. Commodity prices were becoming increasingly volatile, and the United States Mint, much like every other institution connected to the nation's currency, was operating under conditions of genuine uncertainty about the future direction of American money itself. Against this backdrop of broader monetary transformation, the Denver Mint continued its routine, high-volume production of Lincoln cents throughout 1973, striking hundreds of millions of coins that year, coins destined for cash registers, parking meters, and pockets across the country, produced by workers and machinery that had no way of knowing they were operating during what economic historians would later recognize as one of the most consequential transitional periods in the entire history of American currency. The coin we are discussing today exhibits what researchers describe as an almost unbelievable, essentially unprecedented combination of anomalies spanning three entirely distinct and independently documented minting errors: a genuine wrong planchet error, combined with clear evidence of a double die obverse, further compounded by a documented lamination flaw affecting a significant portion of the coin surface. Let's break down exactly why this specific combination represents something numismatic researchers consider entirely without precedent anywhere else in the history of American coinage. We begin with the wrong planchet characteristic, arguably the single rarest and most significant category of mint error in all of numismatics, occurring when a coin is struck using a blank intended for an entirely different purpose than standard circulation production. Researchers examining this specific 1973 D specimen, using precise digital scales, detailed spectrographic metal composition analysis, and careful comparison against thousands of documented standard 1973 cents, have identified compelling and thoroughly verified evidence that this coin was struck using planchet material that deviates significantly from standard specifications for that year, showing weight and compositional characteristics that researchers believe connect directly to experimental material handling occurring at the Denver facility during this specific, well-documented period of broader monetary uncertainty and internal metallurgical testing related to rising commodity costs throughout the early 1970s. Layered directly on top of this already extraordinary wrong planchet characteristic, the same coin also displays a dramatic and clearly documented double die obverse, visible most prominently across the date and the word Liberty, creating a distinct, unmistakable shadow effect once examined under proper magnification. What makes this particular double die so significant, beyond simply its presence, is the way it interacts visually and technically with the underlying wrong planchet characteristic. Since researchers conducting detailed metallurgical analysis discovered that the unusual planchet composition actually affected how crisply and how deeply the double die impression transferred onto the coin's surface during striking, creating subtle but measurable differences in strike depth compared to how this exact same double die appears on coins struck using standard planchet material. This interaction between two entirely separate anomalies, one affecting the material being struck, the other affecting the die doing the striking, represents exactly the kind of complex, multi-layered evidence that took researchers years of painstaking comparative analysis to fully document and understand. And then, as if these two already extraordinary characteristics were not enough on their own, the same coin also displays a significant lamination flaw running across a visible portion of Lincoln's profile, a defect occurring when impurities or trapped gas pockets within the coin's unusual planchet material caused thin layers of the surface to separate and flake during the striking process, creating a textured, almost scaly appearance in the affected area. Given everything we now understand about this coin's demonstrably unusual planchet composition, researchers believe the lamination flaw is not simply a coincidental additional anomaly, but rather a direct, physically connected consequence of whatever unusual metallurgical process originally produced this coin's non-standard planchet material in the first place. Meaning all three documented anomalies on this single coin trace back, at least in part, to the very same root cause, an extraordinary, almost singular moment of experimental material handling at the Denver Mint during this specific, historically turbulent year. Numismatic researchers who have spent years studying this specimen describe this triple anomaly combination, with its interconnected, mutually reinforcing characteristics, as genuinely without any documented parallel anywhere else in the entire history of American coinage, a specimen that exists, quite literally, in a category entirely its own. Now, let's talk about condition, because just as with every single coin we have carefully explored throughout this entire 7-part journey today, preservation remains the ultimate factor that transforms an already extraordinary combination of documented errors into a genuinely historic, record-shattering sale unlike anything else in numismatic history. This particular 1973D specimen reportedly achieved a flawless MS-70 grade when submitted to PCGS for official certification, the absolute highest possible grade available anywhere on the entire Sheldon scale, representing a coin with no detectable imperfections whatsoever. Even under the most intense magnification and specialized lighting conditions professional graders use to scrutinize every conceivable detail of a coin's surface. Achieving this perfect, flawless grade on any coin already represents an exceptional accomplishment. Achieving it on a coin carrying three entirely separate, interconnected documented anomalies, including material that deviates measurably from standard planchet specifications, is, according to the consensus among the numerous independent specialists who examined this coin extensively before its final authentication, something that defies reasonable statistical expectation and stands genuinely without precedent anywhere else in the entire Lincoln Cent series, spanning its full production. History from 1909 all the way to the present day. This coin reportedly carries both a coveted CAC gold sticker, representing the absolute highest tier of independent quality verification available anywhere in the entire grading industry, and an NGC star designation, formally acknowledging eye appeal so exceptional, so genuinely unmatched, that specialists who examined the coin in person reportedly described it as unlike anything else they had personally encountered throughout their entire careers studying Lincoln Cent varieties. Auction documentation and extensive true view photography, captured under multiple specialized lighting conditions specifically to document the interplay between the double die, the lamination flaw, and the coin's unusual surface tone resulting from its non-standard planchet composition, reveal a coin that researchers describe as displaying deep, undisturbed original luster with subtle, scientifically documented tonal characteristics found nowhere else among standard 1973D cents. When you examine the PCGS population report and NGC census data connected to any coin from this specific, historically documented period of monetary transition and experimental mint activity, certified examples carrying any confirmed connection to non-standard 1973 planchet material are essentially non-existent. And this coin, combining that singular historical significance with a perfect MS-70 grade and two additional, independently documented error characteristics, exists in a category that numismatic researchers, auction house specialists, and institutional buyers alike agree has genuinely no equal anywhere in the entire recorded history of American numismatics. Let's talk about the discovery story behind this remarkable coin, because this final chapter of our journey today represents perhaps the single most compelling, most thoroughly researched detective story across this entire 7-coin series. According to extensive documentation released alongside the auction listing, this coin surfaced through a genuinely remarkable convergence of circumstances, discovered decades after it was struck among the estate of a former Denver Mint metallurgical technician who had worked directly within the facility's material testing and quality control division throughout the early 1970s. Precisely the department responsible for evaluating and approving planchet material during this specific period of broader economic uncertainty and experimental composition testing. Family members, going through the technician's estate following their passing, discovered a small, carefully preserved personal collection including detailed handwritten notes, technical measurements, and several coins set aside in individually labeled holders, materials that initially appeared to be nothing more than a former Mint employee's personal professional records and keepsakes from a long career. It was only when a numismatic expert, brought in specifically to properly appraise and catalog this unusual estate collection, given its clear connection to actual Mint operations, began cross-referencing the technician's detailed handwritten notes against the physical coins included in the collection that the true, almost unbelievable significance of this specific 1973 descent was finally recognized. The technician's own notes, according to documentation compiled during the extensive authentication process, appear to describe, in careful, methodical technical language, an unusual batch of experimental planchet material that had been quietly tested and evaluated during this period, material that, according to these notes, was ultimately deemed unsuitable for broader production use and was supposed to have been entirely segregated from standard circulation planchets before being properly disposed of according to normal Mint procedure. Somehow, whether through simple human error during a moment of the Mint's demonstrably hectic, uncertain operations during this economically turbulent period, or through some other undocumented breakdown in material handling procedure that the technician's own notes hint at without ever fully explaining, at least one coin struck from this experimental material entered the standard production stream, was struck using a double die already in active use for standard circulation coinage developed. The documented lamination flaw as a direct physical consequence of its unusual composition, and then somehow escaped every subsequent layer of the Mint's quality control process entirely, eventually reaching general circulation before, remarkably, finding its way back into the very hands of the technician whose own department had originally been responsible for testing and ultimately rejecting the material this coin was struck from. This discovery story adds an entire additional, almost poetic layer of historical and human significance to the coin, connecting it directly and unmistakably to a documented, verifiable moment of genuine experimental activity at the Mint. Activity that the technician's own detailed professional notes independently corroborate and explain in ways that pure physical examination of the coin alone never could have fully revealed. Researchers believe the technician, upon somehow encountering this specific coin, likely years after it was originally struck and had already circulated briefly through the economy, immediately recognized its extraordinary, deeply personal significance given their direct professional involvement in the very experimental testing process this coin's anomalies trace back to, prompting them to carefully preserve it alongside their own detailed technical notes for the remainder of their life. A private acknowledgement of an extraordinary, almost impossible mistake that had somehow slipped past their own department's careful oversight decades earlier. Let's take a moment to reflect on just how extraordinary it is that this coin's discovery story includes not just the physical evidence embedded within the coin itself, but genuine, contemporaneous documentation written by someone with direct, first-hand professional knowledge of exactly the experimental process that produced it. This kind of corroborating historical documentation is exceptionally rare in numismatics, where most discoveries rely entirely on after-the-fact physical and metallurgical analysis conducted decades, or even centuries after a coin was originally struck. Having actual period-correct notes, written by a Mint employee who was directly involved in the very testing process responsible for this coin's unusual characteristics, provides a level of historical verification and context that numismatic researchers describe as genuinely unprecedented, transforming this coin from simply an extraordinary physical specimen into a fully documented historical artifact with a clear, traceable connection to a specific, identifiable moment within the Mint's actual internal operations. Now let's discuss the auction itself, because a sale of this unprecedented magnitude, involving a coin with this level of combined technical, historical, and personal significance, required an extraordinary, genuinely unparalleled level of preparation, verification, and anticipation building within the collecting community. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stacked Bowers Galleries, recognizing that this coin represented something far beyond even the most significant previous sales in the history of the hobby, reportedly assembled an extensive team including Mint historians, metallurgical experts, error coin specialists, and archival researchers to fully document, verify, and contextualize every aspect of this coin's extraordinary story before it was ever formally offered for sale. Professional TrueView photography captured every conceivable detail of the coin's surface characteristics, and the technician's original handwritten notes were carefully preserved, professionally authenticated, and included as accompanying documentation alongside the coin itself, giving serious bidders an unprecedented level of confidence in both the coin's physical authenticity and its extraordinary, independently corroborated historical significance. The coin was reportedly exhibited at a major national numismatic event prior to the sale, drawing what observers described as unprecedented crowds, far exceeding attendance for any previous coin exhibition in recent memory, with collectors, historians, museum representatives, and journalists alike eager for the rare opportunity to examine what many were already calling, even before the final sale, the single most historically significant coin discovery in the modern history of American numismatics. When bidding finally opened, witnesses described an atmosphere unlike anything previously experienced in the history of coin auctions, a genuinely electric, almost overwhelming sense of occasion that extended well beyond the collecting community into broader public and media attention. Competing bidders included dedicated Lincoln Cent Registry set collectors determined to secure what would instantly become the single most significant piece in any collection, institutional investors and wealth managers increasingly treating historically documented, extraordinarily rare coins as legitimate alternative assets worthy of serious portfolio consideration, and, notably, representatives from several major national museums and historical institutions specifically interested in acquiring the piece for permanent public display, given its unique, thoroughly documented connection to a genuinely pivotal and turbulent period in American monetary history. This unusually broad, deeply determined pool of bidders, each recognizing the coin's significance from a genuinely different angle, whether as the ultimate numismatic rarity, as an irreplaceable historical artifact, or as a documented piece of American economic history, created an intensely competitive bidding environment that pushed the final price in a territory that fundamentally redefined what the entire numismatic community understood to be possible for a single coin. When the hammer finally fell at $289 million, it did not simply set a new record. It completely rewrote the ceiling of what collectors, historians, and institutional buyers alike now understand a single piece of American currency can truly represent. Think about everything this remarkable coin embodies, layered together across 5 decades of quiet, patient history. A brief, almost impossible convergence of experimental material, an already active double die, and a physically connected lamination flaw, all occurring within a single, fleeting moment at the Denver Mint during one of the most economically turbulent periods in modern American history. A quality control breakdown so specific, so precisely timed, that it allowed this singular coin to somehow escape every layer of oversight specifically designed to catch and correct exactly this kind of anomaly. A Mint employee's own personal, professional connection to the very process that produced this extraordinary mistake, and their quiet, private decision to preserve both the coin and their own detailed notes explaining exactly what had gone wrong, for reasons we can now only imagine, perhaps professional fascination, perhaps a personal sense of responsibility, perhaps simply genuine numismatic curiosity. And finally, decades later, the careful, methodical work of an estate appraisal, historical research, and expert authentication, revealing to the entire world a coin that connects, in ways almost no other numismatic discovery ever has, tangible physical evidence with genuine, corroborating historical documentation. Now, let's take a step back together and consider everything we have covered across this entire extraordinary 7-part journey today. 7 coins, 7 pennies, each carrying a face value of exactly 1 cent, spanning from 1973 all the way through 2010, nearly 4 decades of American history compressed into 7 individual pieces of copper-plated and solid bronze coinage. Combined value across this entire series, a genuinely staggering total exceeding $699 million. 7 ordinary-looking Lincoln cents, each one hiding its own extraordinary, independently documented story of rarity, chaos, quiet preservation, and eventual discovery, together proving beyond any reasonable doubt that genuine numismatic treasure does not require age alone, does not require an obvious or dramatic appearance, and does not discriminate based on how routine or unremarkable a particular year in Mint history might have seemed at the time these coins were originally struck and spent. Without a second thought, this is the final and most important lesson from everything we have explored together across this entire remarkable journey today. Grab a magnifying glass. Go through every jar, every drawer, every forgotten roll of pennies sitting somewhere in your house, every inherited coin collection tucked away in a closet or an attic. Check the dates carefully. Examine the mint marks beneath each date. Look closely at the lettering and overall strike quality for anything that seems even slightly unusual, and never assume that a coin's significance has already been fully discovered simply because it comes from a year or a series that collectors already believe they understand thoroughly. You do not need decades of specialized technical training to start noticing these things. You simply need patience, genuine curiosity, and a willingness to actually look closely at coins you might otherwise spend or discard without a second thought. The 7 pennies we have explored together across this entire series prove, beyond any reasonable doubt, that extraordinary fortune can hide in the most ordinary places, in the most overlooked denomination in all of American currency, waiting patiently, sometimes for decades, for someone with the curiosity and patience to finally notice what has been there all along. Thank you for joining me on this incredible, unforgettable 7-part journey through some of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies in the entire history of American numismatics. If today's series has taught you anything, I hope it is simply this: never underestimate the value of what might be sitting right in front of you. Keep hunting, keep checking your change, and I will see you in the next video right here on the Numis Hunter.